I remember the day I first saw the Gigopler. It was a warm summer evening, and I was out camping with a few friends in a remote area of the woods. We had set up our tents near a lake, and everything seemed peaceful and calm. We were sitting around the fire, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories when we heard something rustling in the bushes. We all assumed it was just a raccoon or some other small animal, but as the noise got closer, we realized it was much larger. That's when we saw it. The Gigopler. It was standing on two legs, towering over us at nearly 8 feet tall. Its skin was a sickly gray, and it had a single, glowing red eye that seemed to pierce through us. We were frozen in fear as the Gigopler approached our campsite. It let out a bone-chilling howl, and we knew we had to act fast. We grabbed our gear and sprinted into the woods, hoping to lose the creature in the darkness. But the Gigopler was fast, and it chased us through the woods with ease. We could hear its heavy footsteps pounding the ground behind us, and its hot breath on our necks. We ran for what felt like hours, until we stumbled upon an abandoned cabin in the woods. We quickly barricaded ourselves inside, hoping that the Gigopler wouldn't be able to break through. For hours we sat in silence, listening to the Gigopler pacing outside, trying to find a way in. Eventually, the sun began to rise, and the creature retreated back into the woods. We waited until the daylight was strong enough to venture out, and we made a run for our car. We never spoke of the Gigopler again, but I'll never forget the terror it brought upon us that night. I've never gone camping in the woods again, and I don't think I ever will. The Gigopler is out there, and I know that if I ever encounter it again, I might not be so lucky to escape. I had always heard stories of the Wendigo, the legendary creature that roamed the forests of the Great Lakes region, but I never believed in them. That is, until I had my own encounter with one. It was a cold, dark night in late November when I decided to go for a walk in the woods behind my house. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the only light came from my flashlight. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I brushed it off as paranoia and kept going. But then I heard a sound, something that I couldn't quite place. It sounded like a cross between a growl and a scream, and it made my blood run cold. I turned around, shining my flashlight in every direction, but I couldn't see anything. That's when I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head and saw it, the Wendigo. It was tall, impossibly thin, with antlers jutting out from its head. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, and its mouth was stretched into an impossibly wide grin. It looked like something out of a nightmare. I froze, unsure of what to do. The Wendigo didn't seem to be attacking me, but I knew that I needed to get out of there. I slowly began to back away, keeping my eyes fixed on the creature in front of me. It didn't move, but it didn't take its eyes off of me either. Finally, I made it back to my house. I slammed the door shut and locked it, collapsing on the floor in a panic. I didn't know what to do. Who would believe me if I told them what I had just seen? It's been months since that night, and I still can't shake the memory of the Wendigo from my mind. I've never been back into those woods again, and I don't think I ever will. But I know one thing for sure, the Wendigo is real, and it's out there, waiting for its next victim. I never believed in the supernatural until I experienced it for myself. It was a dark and chilly night when I was driving home from a friend's house. The road was deserted and the only sound was the hum of my car's engine. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just an animal on the side of the road, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. It was standing on two legs, with the body of a man and the head of a wolf. Its eyes glowed a piercing yellow in the darkness, and I could see its razor-sharp teeth as it snarled at me. I tried to accelerate, but my car sputtered and died. I was trapped, alone with the creature in the dead of night. I could feel its eyes on me, watching me as I fumbled for my phone. I managed to dial 911, but the line was dead. The Skinwalker was getting closer, its breath hot on my face. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in terror, but eventually the creature backed away into the darkness. I started my car and drove as fast as I could, not stopping until I was safely home. Since that night, I've done my research. I've learned that skinwalkers are shape-shifting witches from Navajo legend, able to transform into any animal they choose. They're said to prey on humans, seeking to harm and terrorize them. I don't know why I was targeted that night, but I'm grateful to be alive. I don't drive alone at night anymore, and I always keep a protective charm with me. I still have nightmares about that glowing-eyed monster, and I know I'll never forget the terror I felt in its presence. I never believed in monsters. As a rational person, I always dismissed the idea of creatures lurking in the shadows. That is, until I had a close encounter with something I couldn't explain. Something that sent chills down my spine and made me fear for my life. It was a warm summer night, and I had decided to take a hike in the woods. I had been on this trail countless times before, but this time felt different. The air was thick, and an eerie silence hung in the atmosphere. I shrugged it off and continued on my walk. That's when I saw it. A figure in the distance, standing on its hind legs. I assumed it was a bear at first, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. It was tall, almost 7 feet, with long, lanky arms and legs. It had a single, large eye in the center of its forehead, and its skin looked as if it were made of bark. It was a Gigopler. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I had heard of Gigoplers before, but I never thought I'd encounter one. I had always thought they were just a myth, a story told to scare children. But here it was, staring right at me. For what felt like hours, we stood there, the Gigopler and I, staring at each other. I was too afraid to move, too afraid to make any sudden movements that might provoke it. It was then that I realized I was standing in the middle of the Gigopler's territory, and I was in grave danger. Suddenly, the Gigopler let out a blood-curdling scream, and I took off running as fast as I could. I didn't look back until I was a safe distance away, but when I did, I saw that it was gone. The Gigopler had disappeared into the night, and I was left alone, shaken to my core. I never went back to that part of the woods again, and I never spoke of my encounter with the Gigopler to anyone. I knew they would never believe me, and I didn't want to be labeled as crazy. But the memory of that night still haunts me to this day, and I can't help but wonder if the Gigopler is still out there, waiting for its next victim. I never believed in supernatural creatures until I had my encounter with a Wendigo. It was a chilly winter evening when my friend, Dave, and I decided to take a hike in the woods near our town. We had been planning this for weeks, and finally, we had the chance to go. We were both experienced hikers and had been on many trails before, so we thought this would be just another one of our adventures. We started our hike around 6 p.m. and reached the halfway point by 8 p.m. As we continued on the trail, the woods became darker, and the wind picked up. We decided to turn back, as we didn't want to get caught in the woods after dark. But as we were heading back, we heard strange noises coming from the woods. At first, we thought it was just an animal, but the sounds became louder and more frequent. Suddenly, we saw something moving in the bushes. At first, we thought it was a deer, but as it emerged from the bushes, we saw that it was something much larger and more frightening. It was a Wendigo. Its long arms, twisted antlers, and razor-sharp teeth were enough to give us nightmares for weeks. We froze in terror as the Wendigo approached us. Its eyes were glowing red, and its breath was hot and foul-smelling. It was at least 8 feet tall, and its bony fingers looked like they could tear us apart in seconds. We knew we had to get out of there, so we started running as fast as we could. The Wendigo chased after us, its footsteps pounding on the ground behind us. We could hear it breathing heavily, and we knew it was getting closer. Just as we thought we were done for, we saw the lights of our town up ahead. We ran towards the lights, and the Wendigo disappeared back into the woods. We reported the sighting to the authorities, but they dismissed it as a hoax. But Dave and I knew what we saw that night, and we never ventured into those woods again. We had encountered a Wendigo, and it was something that we would never forget. I'm not really one for spooky stories or supernatural beliefs, but something happened to me a few years ago that I still can't explain. It was the middle of the night, and I was driving back from a friend's house in the desert. The road was long and winding, and the only thing I could see for miles around were the tall saguaro cacti towering over the sand. As I was driving, I saw something moving in my rearview mirror. It was too dark to see anything clearly, but it looked like a figure running behind my car. I shook it off, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But the feeling of unease lingered. I was about halfway home when I saw something strange in the distance. It was a large, dark shape that seemed to be moving erratically. As I got closer, I could see that it was some kind of animal, but it wasn't anything I recognized. Its limbs were long and thin, and it seemed to be loping along the side of the road, almost like it was trying to keep up with me. I tried to convince myself that it was just a stray dog or a coyote, but the closer I got, the more I realized that this was something else entirely. Its eyes glinted in the darkness, and for a moment, I could swear they were human-like. Suddenly, the creature darted into the road, and I slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting it. I sat there, frozen in fear, as the thing slowly turned to face me. That's when I saw its face, or what passed for one. Its features were twisted and distorted, almost as if they were melting together. And then, it started to change. Its body began to contort and twist, and its skin rippled like waves on a pond. In a matter of seconds, it had transformed into something else entirely. It was like watching a werewolf transformation in a horror movie, only this was happening right in front of me. I was so scared I couldn't move. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, watching something that wasn't possible happen right in front of my eyes. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned and ran off into the desert. I drove the rest of the way home in a daze, unable to shake the feeling that something was still watching me. It's been years since that night, but I still have nightmares about it sometimes. I don't know what I saw, but I know it was real. And that's what scares me the most. I remember the day I saw a Gigopler like it was yesterday, even though it happened over a decade ago. It was the summer of 2010, and I was camping in the remote woods of northern Minnesota with a few friends. We had been hiking all day and decided to set up camp near a small lake. As we were sitting around the campfire, we heard rustling in the bushes nearby. At first, we assumed it was a small animal or maybe a deer, but the rustling grew louder and more frequent. We decided to investigate, thinking it might be a bear or some other large animal. As we walked towards the noise, we saw something that stopped us in our tracks. Standing about 50 yards away was a creature that looked like it had stepped straight out of a nightmare. It was tall, around 8 feet, with matted brown fur covering its entire body. Its head was grotesque, with only one large, glowing red eye and a snarling, fang-filled mouth. The creature let out a blood-curdling roar that echoed through the forest. It was unlike any sound I had ever heard before, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It started to lumber towards us, and we quickly realized that we were in danger. We ran as fast as we could back to our campsite, but the creature was faster. It seemed to glide effortlessly through the forest, and I could hear its ragged breathing behind me. As we reached the campsite, we quickly packed up our gear and jumped into our car, tearing out of the woods as fast as we could. For years, I tried to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe it was a bear with a deformity, or a prank pulled by some other campers in the area. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it couldn't have been anything but a Gigopler. I've since read about other sightings of similar creatures in remote areas, and I count myself lucky that we made it out of there alive. I never want to encounter one of those creatures again, and I urge anyone who's camping in the wilderness to stay vigilant and be aware of the dangers that lurk in the shadows. I was on a camping trip with a group of friends in the dense woods of northern Canada. It was a beautiful location, with tall trees reaching towards the sky and a babbling creek nearby. We were having a great time, cooking over the campfire and telling stories late into the night. But on the third night of our trip, everything changed. We were all sitting around the fire, roasting marshmallows and talking, when we heard something moving in the trees. It sounded like a large animal, maybe a bear or a moose, so we all got up to investigate. But what we saw was nothing like we expected. It was a tall, thin creature, standing on two legs, with matted fur covering its body. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, and it had long, sharp teeth. At first, we were frozen with fear. But then the creature started to move towards us, and we all ran for our lives. We could hear it chasing us through the woods, its heavy footsteps pounding on the ground. We ran for what felt like hours, until we finally reached a clearing. We all collapsed, gasping for breath, and looked back towards the woods. We couldn't see anything, but we could hear the creature's eerie howls echoing through the trees. We knew then that we had encountered a Wendigo, a creature of Native American legend that was said to prey on humans in the wilderness. It was a terrifying experience, and one that we will never forget. Since that night, I've never gone camping in the woods again. I don't want to risk another encounter with the Wendigo, and I don't want to put myself or my friends in danger. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I can still hear its howls in the distance, reminding me of that terrifying night in the woods. I never believed in the supernatural until I had my encounter with a skinwalker. It was a warm summer night, and I was driving home from my late shift at the gas station. The roads were empty, and the only sound I could hear was the hum of my car's engine. As I approached the forest, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was a deer, but as I got closer, I realized it was something far more sinister. A creature, with the head of a wolf and the body of a human, stood on two legs in the middle of the road. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, and its fur was matted and unkempt. I slammed on the brakes and came to a stop. The creature started to walk towards my car, and I could see its mouth moving, but I couldn't hear anything. I was frozen with fear, and my mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. Should I try to drive away? Should I call the police? Before I could make a decision, the creature stopped and started to transform. Its fur fell away, and its body contorted until it looked like an old woman. She smiled at me, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth, and said, "You're lucky, child. I was going to kill you, but you looked too afraid." With that, she turned and disappeared into the forest. I drove home, still in shock from what had just happened. I told my friends and family about the encounter, but they all dismissed it as my imagination. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget the fear I felt that night. I learned to respect the power of the supernatural and to always be aware of my surroundings. You never know when a skinwalker might be watching.